Overwatch is an ever-evolving game, and with every patch the intent is for the game to become even closer to the best version of itself. In this series of videos I will be revisiting every hero and providing my opinion as a game designer and Overwatch addict about their current state and which changes I would do for each one of them. To begin with, I will go over supports, as I have played hours and hours of each one of them, and I have a very strong opinion on the current state of each one of them. As a disclaimer, this is purely for fun and it's just my opinion about the game. This isn't the objective truth, but what I believe would improve each hero's identity and the game as a whole. Lastly, I cannot realistically test these changes, so numbers are just estimates, and what matters is the context and overall direction. These changes could very well break some of the heroes, but power is not the main focus. The overall idea is to leave them somewhat neutral in power besides a few cases. To preface my overall opinion on the current state, supports as a whole have been pushed too much towards being almost exclusively backline spammers, with their survivability and cooldowns being adjusted in such ways that taking risks are not worth it most of the time, which at the same time encourages the least interactive playstyle that are not fun to play against or with. Looking at recent changes to Lifeweaver, Ana or Wuyang, it really does feel like they are being homogenized into one singular playstyle, so most of my changes are pushing heroes into specific niches that provide more diversity for the support roster. Another thing to point out is that I'm trying to keep the identity and the abilities functionally as close as possible to how they are right now. As for supports, I only believe one hero needs a somewhat considerable rework, while the others would do with mostly number changes. I will also not take perks into account, as I don't believe those are worth limiting the potential of the core hero. Lastly, before starting, if you like the video, remember to leave a like and subscribe, as it helps me a ton. Ana is one of the most popular supports, and she has always been, but she is also quite divisive, as her nade and sleep alone are one of the highest frustration points for any tank player, to be honest. At the same time, the format change to 5v5 has forced her into some very long cooldowns that in my opinion aren't ideal. My proposed changes would change nade healing reaction from 100% to 75%, the healing reaction duration from 3 to 2.5 seconds, the damage and heal reduced from 75 to 65, but most importantly the cooldown will go down from 14 to 10 seconds. These changes push back nade's cooldown from what it was in Overwatch 1, leaving sleep as a long defensive cooldown, while nade is allowed to be used more proactively and allowing Ana for more aggressive positions, as in my opinion the healbot pure backline playstyle many Anas fall into is not only less fun for the flow of the game, but also very frustrating to play with. This also allows Ana to rotate more as a whole, as she has smaller windows where nade isn't up. How many times have you died while your Ana is still very far back while complaining she can't heal you due to their positioning? Of course, with the cooldown being reduced, the healing reduction and other effects would have to go down as well, with the heal reduction being now a partial reduction, as well as the duration reduced, so it is less frustrating to go against as a tank, which are the heroes that tend to have enough mitigation to survive for 2.5 seconds without much trouble. Baptiste's design was very clearly crafted for 6v6 as basically an AoE lifesaver support. This honestly never functioned quite well in 5v5, with his cooldowns being used mostly for purely reactive and selfish use cases. I do believe the AoE aspects can remain, but having exclusively two defensive AoE cooldowns only hinder the other parts of his kit, which are really cool in my opinion. We can already see a much better version of Fab with his attack speed major perk, so leaning into that direction would be ideal. For my proposed changes, primary fire recovery time would be increased from 0.36 to 0.45 seconds, which is essentially how it was before getting buffed. Secondary fire direct healing from 90 to 80. Regen burst is getting most of the changes. It will no longer double the instant healing at half HP, now grants a 15% attack speed to allies hit, buff included. The cooldown is reduced to 12 seconds, the duration is reduced from 4 to 3 seconds, and the range is increased a little bit. Immortality Field will receive minor changes, with its duration reduced from 5 to 3 seconds, while the cooldown will also go down from 22 to 20 seconds. The idea behind these changes is to reduce the power of both his primary and secondary fire, which are currently taking a lot of his power budget, to make his ability better and more functional in 5v5. For Regen Burst, it no longer has a bonus for being used reactively and nor provides attack speed, allowing a more proactive use which can function as both offense and defense, as it also does buffs and his allies' healing output, thanks to most supports benefiting from attack speed, with the total duration reduced, so there is a bit more counterplay if you have some form of defense. This would require a change to his major perk, but I am not taking those into account for today. The range buff simply allows less restrictive positioning, as in 5v5 people are more spread out, and the cooldown will help for players to not feel forced to save it for the last moment, like it's currently being used. Immortality field changes also encourage more potential uses for the ability, while the duration nerf should reduce the frustration when the field is out of line of sight and cannot be destroyed. While Brig isn't exactly popular, her niche playstyle has a very strong player base, myself included, that really love the hero. With that being said, in my opinion, her passive, which should be a prominent aspect of her kit, feels very relevant and most of her healing output is on her repair packs. At the same time, her shield feels very squishy, as they didn't receive any buff post Season 9, whereas the damage of many heroes has gone up. For the changes, Inspired total healing will go from 60 to 100, but the duration will be changed from 4 to 5 seconds, so the healing per second will only go from 15 to 20. Her shield HP would go from 250 to 300, her bash damage would go down from 70 to 60, repair packs healing per second would be reduced from 50 to 40, leaving a total from 125 to 105, and rallies will grant Brig an extra 150 armor. These changes will award a more aggressive and active playstyle, shifting her healing output away from repair packs and more towards Inspire, but retaining the lower cooldown on packs because it simply feels better that way. Buffing Inspire duration is especially important since it will help her on her bad matchups where she can't realistically proc it every 4 seconds. Her shield buff should also universally help, but specifically against some poke heroes breakpoints like Hanzo and Junkrat. While the bash damage buff she received some time ago would be partially reverted as she already does really well into heroes she can use it to deal damage. Rally would also give Brig a bit more tankiness as it wasn't compensated with the Season 9 changes, and she honestly dies way too often while using it, but with its burst damage potential reduced due to the bash nerf. Illari was meant to be a hitscan support that would focus on dealing damage while her turret does the healing job most of the time, but as it stands currently, they have shifted her away more and more from this into more of a healer that can poke a bit in between heals, which I don't really think is ideal due to how clunky it feels. Her primary fire was left in a really weak spot after nerfs and Season 9, which means she doesn't really stand out anymore. Her pylon-oriented playstyle is also a bit more stiff than it should be, while she has many defensive options that it can feel quite hard to kill her whenever she has her pylon up. Or the changes that would change the primary fire max damage from 70 to 85, while the crit will still be untouched. Her projectile size will be decreased from 0.05 to 0.03, and the max charge time increased from 0.75 to 0.8. Her secondary fire would receive a max recharge time from 3 to 4 seconds, outbursts would get a max travel distance from 10 to 14 meters, while the speed would be increased to match the new range, and the cooldown would also go up from 7 to 9 seconds. Her pylon would also get a lot of changes, with the cooldown being reduced from 14 to 12 seconds, the reposition cooldown from 7 to 5 seconds, the build time reduced from 1.3 to 1 second, the throw speed will also get increased, while the max range will be reduced from 15 to 12 meters, and the HP will be reduced from 75 to 50 for 100 total. The changes to her primary fire are meant to leave her with an overall similar DPS, while the potency is increased to match the fantasy of her weapon. It still has a 1.5 crit damage, so it doesn't one-shot Tracer with a melee or have an insane amount of burst potential. To compensate, her Outfire will have a longer time to recharge, as she shouldn't be spending as much time as she does healing, so it's closer to something like Wuyang stream, keeping the healing burst potential intact. On the other hand, Outburst and Pylon are being adjusted, so the Illari player is encouraged to move around and reposition, while forcing her to be closer to the pylon if she wants to get healed, and with this HP reuse so the enemy can punish her more easily if she made a poor rotation, while the cooldown reaction makes it feel less terrible if it gets destroyed by random spam or if you decide to use it on someone who is further away. With this similar intention, Outburst is a better reposition tool, while it has a longer window to punish Illari if she makes a mistake. These changes do have the potential to make her extremely strong, as she would also be able to burst her ult with a fully charged body shot, but in the case it would be a problem, it could easily be adjusted. I personally don't mind making her ult a bit stronger, but it can generate overly aggressive metas, as it is the only fully offensive support ultimate. Honestly, Juno, after the 2 rounds of changes she received, is possibly the support in the best state with Lucio, and in my opinion requires almost no changes. She is popular, fun, and not frustrating to go against, while providing a very unique experience with her movement on her weapon. The only changes I would make will be for the torpedoes on hit damage and healing going down from 85 to 80, her ult cost being decreased from 3900 to 2750, while her ult travel speed will go from 2.25 to 3.5 meters per second. As I mentioned, I believe Juno is fine overall in terms of her design and execution. The only adjustment I would do is to decrease her ult cost a bit more, as it currently doesn't really justify that high of a cost compared to other support ults. At the same time, it travels really slowly, and for a movement-based support hero, it feels extremely awkward to use. The speed is also still below the average walking speed, so it shouldn't cause any issues. To compensate, I would reduce damage and healing on torpedoes, which is probably taking a bit too much of her power budget. While it seems like a very small nerf, it adds up pretty fast since it affects every single target it hits. While Kiriko is very popular, she's statistically one of the weaker supports while being one of the most frustrating to play against due to her high survivability and Susu as a whole. With that in mind, I personally would approach a higher risk-reward version of the hero that allows for more offensive TPs and Susu usage. Her other big issue is how much stronger she is in coordinated play, which forces her to be weaker for the average player. For the changes, I would increase her base HP from 225 to 250, healing on Fudas will no longer break when it touches terrain, her TP cooldown would be going up from 7 to 9 seconds, Susu healing would be changed from 80 to 110 if it plans something to always being 80 flat, it will no longer provide invulnerability, but now it will provide 20% attack speed for every ally hit for 3 seconds, and the cooldown would go down from 14 to 12. Kitsune Rush would also be a bit wider, and the visuals to be clearer for the ally team. These changes would allow Kiriko to be able to actually TP offensively to save allies and turn the fight like she was supposed to, as she has a higher health pool and Susu provides a lot more offensive value for you and your allies. At the same time, with the removal of the on-target ability and a longer TP cooldown, she would be much easier to pin down once the Susu attack speed runs out. The changes to her healing of Fura and Kitsune Rush are almost entirely meant to be buffs for the average player, where the lack of coordination can cause your Fudas to not reach the target, as well as missing some of the value from her ultimate. Weaver is one of the worst supports in the game right now, but Blizzard has slowly been improving most aspects of his kit, allowing him to be better at dealing damage, providing unique attributes like high ground access and more, while reducing the more potentially frustrating aspects like the Healbot Weaver standing on a 400 HP platform forever that some characters simply cannot kill. That being said, they did one very big miss with his changes not long ago that I would walk back, as well as reducing his effective range while increasing his numbers so he can do more things in the middle of a fight. I would increase his base HP back from 250 to 275, Thorn's body damage would go from 6 to 7 each, Healing Blossom max charge would go from 80 to 90, with the charge time adjusted accordingly so the overall healing per second is the same. Passive charge would be increased by 25%, Healing Blossom and life range would be decreased from 30 to 25 meters, and Petal platform HP would go down from 300 to 200. As I mentioned, Weaver should be a 275 HP hero. He should be encouraged to get up close, not only because his weapon and movement options simply function better at close quarters, but it will also reduce the frustrating aspects of his kit, like ripping from max range to save someone, and discouraging the healbot playstyle most people hate to go with or against. While I don't want to completely remove that aspect, I want to reduce it by reducing both grips and Healing Blossom range, as well as a further decrease in the platform HP for the reasons I mentioned before. To compensate and to buff him a bit since he's quite weak, his damage and healing outputs would go up a bit so he can provide more value overall from a closer distance. Lucio is probably the best designed support in the current iteration of the game, but at the same time he's a hero I haven't played nearly enough to believe he requires any changes, so for him I would ask the viewer, do you believe Lucio needs any changes or is he fine as he is? I read you down below. Making any change for Mercy is a complicated task, mostly because despite being a hero most considered a poorly designed for the current 5v5 version of the game, she's still one of the most popular and main supports in the entire game, and her gameplay at its core is very unique compared to anyone in the whole roster of Overwatch. That being said, I do believe there are two things that could be changed to make her healthier for the game, which are based on the experimental changes she got during Overwatch 1 that never got shipped, allowing her to have better mobility, as well as introducing actual cooldown management to her kit. The GA cancel cooldown will go down from 2.5 to 2 seconds, damage boost will go down from 30 to 25%, and now Res and Valkyrie will be swapped. Valkyrie will be changed to a 12 seconds cooldown that resets GA's cooldown, allows Mercy to free flight with extra 30% movement speed for 2.5 seconds, and boosts staff healing from 60 to 80 per seconds, and damage boost from 25 to 35% for its duration. Res will now be her ultimate, that after half a second of cast time would resurrect a single ally, granting them and Mercy 100 over health and 20% movement speed for 3 seconds. These changes would allow Mercy to have a more consistent ability while introducing cooldown management to the entry-level hero. The changes towards better mobility and a weaker damage boost should allow Mercy to move and swap their targets without being easily punished by the enemy, as well as allowing her to follow most dive heroes and not be forced towards pocketing a hit scan in the backline. Res, while an ultimate, now has a much shorter cast time as well as providing overheal and speed to Mercy and the target, which allows her to rest someone who died in more difficult positions as long as the Mercy player is aware of the enemy cooldowns so it doesn't get interrupted, and reducing the frustration of the current one as a normal ability that is only used out of line of sight without much counterplay. Compared to the experimental changes, Valk is a far shorter cooldown, as the experimental version was very weak, and the whole point of giving her another ability would be to introduce cooldown management, which a 17 cooldown wouldn't really allow to. While to compensate, I would reduce her base power of damage boost. For Rest, I don't think it can ever work as an AoE ability, but a mostly reliable single target version would be far healthier while still retaining that aspect for the hero. Of course, it still needs to feel powerful, which is why I added the other effects, as well as making it more reliable. Moira is meant to be an entry-level hero that is easy and simple to play, similar to Mercy, but besides from that, her identity is a mess currently. She can't really poke, she can't really dive, and can't roll either, so she's stuck as a very mediocre in everything hero that doesn't provide any unique utility or value to a team. She's somewhat popular, but her kit could still be improved a lot. For Moira, I would change her base HP from 225 to 250, her Grasp primary fire lingering heal from 17 to 25 per second, her Grasp secondary lifesteal reduced from 30 to 20 per second, and Biotic Orb would receive a lot of changes, with the orb speed increased from 20 to 30 meters per second, while the orb speed when attached to someone would be decreased from 5.5 to 4.5 meters per second. The healing orb healing per second will go down from 65 to 50, but will now apply a 30% healing amp on your allies. The damage orb damage per second will go from 50 to 35, but will now apply a 20% healing reaction that would stack with the DPS passive. To compensate, the cooldowns will go down from 8 to 10 seconds and the duration from 7 to 5 seconds. Moira's kit, despite having decent mobility, does not justify being a 225 hero when she has one of the shortest range among supports. That being said, her total survivability in lower ranks is really high, so reducing the potentials of healing should help them out a bit. On the other hand, while keeping the overall core and simplicity of her kit, I would adjust her orbs to be less spammy and more impactful and decisive for the outcome of the Moira player. While they have higher cooldowns and slightly less raw value, they are more reliable and have some form of utility that can turn a fight if used correctly. She is also quite weak right now, so a small buff wouldn't really hurt her. Wuyang is the newest support hero and one whose kit is very well defined and for the most part really well executed. That being said, his wave is quite underwhelming on its application, while his ceiling is probably too high for a support that is meant to focus on controlling his primary fire most of the time. One use staff damage will be changed from 40 to 60 to 50-50 in its direct and splash damage, and the active restoration stream region would go down from 12.5 to 10 per second. Wei will receive some changes, with its healing amp being reduced from 50 to 40% and the duration of that amp being reduced from 3 to 2.5 seconds, while the cooldown will go down from 14 to 12 seconds. The damage will be adjusted from an 80 to 40 to a flat 60, and will now apply 20% slow for 1.5 seconds to enemies hit. The goal of these changes is to allow Wave to be used in more ways and not just a burst healing option for the tank, which is how it is used 90% of the time, due to the low offensive application and the long cooldown. The slow is also very thematic, as water-based characters usually have some form of speed control, which in Wuyang's case can only be found in the speed boost of Tidal Blast. The nursing compensation are targeted towards his healing and his splash damage, while the total damage of a direct hit would remain unchanged, as it should be rewarding to land. Zen has a very sharp design with big weaknesses and very big strengths. I don't think his weaknesses need to be diminished, but I do think his strength as a long-range damage support has diminished over time due to the constant range buffs to many DPS, this core going away on a target, as well as his big hitbox making him a very easy target post Season 9 with the increase of projectile sizes. So for the changes, his hitbox would be reduced, mostly on his legs, the projectile speed from his sword would go from 90 to 100, while the discord damage jump would be reduced to 25 to 20%. These changes should allow Zen to feel better when playing from afar, while reducing the most frustrating part of his kit, which is discord, specifically against tanks. And that's every change I would do for Overwatch supports. To sum up, allow heroes like Weaver, Moira and Mercy to play closer to the actual fight, with better survivability and movement, but less range, and diminishing the value of said heroes when playing them defensively, allowing them to not only provide more impact, but for the enemy to be able to punish them more easily if they misplay. There will still be a lot of backline supports like Zen, Wuyang and Illari, but we need to let and encourage supports to get their hands dirty, as it allows for better team play and less frustration for both the enemy and your teammates.